Actually, we're going to get started now. Welcome to Thursday's plenary. Right? You made it. Congratulations. There are plenty of new folks that are joining us today, but so welcome to each and every one of you who are joining us for the first time or for the first time this week. You're welcome, and we've got a full lineup today, so make sure you're going to stick around. I would just like to thank everybody who joined us for dinner. Did you have a good time last night? Fantastic. So thank you to A.Y. Young. He's already left the building, but it was great to have him at the dinner and to energize and motivate us. And so A.Y., if you're listening, thank you so much for coming to Chapel Hill and performing for us and being an inspiration. It was great to have you a part of the program. And we're going to go ahead and get moving on a couple of announcements. And so I'd like to introduce two gentlemen to you. You might have seen them walking around, but they've been a little bit shy because they will claim that they don't speak English very well, but that is a lie. So I will bring them to the stage. Omar Sen and Lamine Diouk from the government of Senegal.
Thank you, Keda. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Omar Sen. I'm the National Sanitation Director of the Ministry of Water and Sanitation of Senegal. I'm here to participate to this conference, and I am honored to lead the delegation of Ministry of Water and Sanitation of Senegal in attending this conference. On behalf of our minister, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to the organizer and to the management of Water Institute of Chapel Hill for their kind invitation and for warm welcome extended to our delegation. And now I will invite my colleague, Lamine Diouk, technical advisor to our Minister of Water and Sanitation, to speak about the United Nations Water Conference that will be organized by my country and the United Arab Emirates at 2026. Mr. Diouk, you can deliver our message. Thank you for you.
Thank you, Mr. Sen. Ladies and gentlemen, first off, allow me to explain our sincere appreciation to Ms. Kaida. Thank you, Kaida. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to speak about the United Nations Water Conference 2026. We are truly grateful for this opportunity because when it's come to the global water agenda, every chance to connect has meaning. Ladies and gentlemen, after hosting with great success the 9th World Water Forum, Senegal has the honor to co-organize with the United Arab Emirates the 3rd United Nations Water Conference. On the road to this important event, a high-level meeting will be held in Dakar, Senegal, 26 and 27 January 2026. This meeting will play a key role in shaping the success of the conference itself. That's why we are using this opportunity to invite all of you to join us in Dakar, Senegal. All the stakeholders from private sector, academia, private sector, academia, civil society, and policy makers. Here at Chapel Hill, we see the spirit of partnership and collaboration that needed to make the Dakar meeting a success. We warmly we warmly invite you all to Senegal, the land of teranga, the country of hospitality and dialogue. Our contact information will be shared to facilitate your participation, and I hope your insights. Thank you for your attention. All the contacts are here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fantastic. And so if you have any questions, email is located at the bottom of the screen, and we're so pleased that you were able to join us this week. And now I will let Michelle from Business Connect take the stage in presentation of the Technology and Innovation Showcase Awards.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Michelle Bashar, Chief Marketing Officer of Business Connect, and it's an honor to recognize the innovation and dedicated represented this year at the Technology Showcase. Over the past 2 days, we've had the opportunity to see a range of creative, practical, and high-impact technologies. And today, we will be recognizing 3 of these technologies to receive the Innovation Award, the Impact Award, and the Audience Choice Award. The Innovation Award recognizes a solution that introduces a novel approach with technical feasibility supported by evidence. This year's winner is Eco Soap Bank for their product Soap Play. Soap Play creatively transforms discarded soap into a valuable hygiene product, combining waste reduction and community empowerment. Congrats to Eco Soap Bank. If you'd like to come up on stage, we'd love to present you with this Innovation Award. I'd like to also welcome our judges to the stage, Jeremy Lambert and Michael Fisher. All right, for our next award is the Impact Award. It recognizes a technology that addresses significant challenges while keeping in mind societal and environmental impact. This year's Impact Award goes to Aqua Research. They have been doing innovative work in advancing sustainable water purification technologies, and their approach demonstrates measurable community-level impact providing safe water. Congratulations, Aqua Research. Right, and finally was the Audience Choice Award. This celebrates the technology that resonated most with our WASH community, and based on your votes, the 2025 Audience Choice Award goes to TurryTap. Their inline chlorination is at the point of manual hand pumps, and their design offers a simple, scalable way to make safe water accessible in rural areas. Congratulations, TurryTap. Let's give another round of applause to all of our presenters and winners. Your creative persistence and commitment to advancing water solutions inspires us all. We look forward to seeing how these solutions really take flight over the next year, and excited to celebrate even more innovations in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you to Business Connect for sponsoring our Technology and Innovation Showcase and the awards. Again, we are recording all of our presentations, all of our sessions. And so I encourage you after the conference to make sure that you go back and check out the Water Institute and the conference YouTube channel, where all those sessions will be posted online. And we hope that you will use those sessions in classrooms, in conversations, in meetings as you go forward, and take advantage of this important material that we're putting online for future use. We don't want it just to be a one and done, and so take advantage of having those sessions online and keep using them. And so now I turn it over to Darren Saywell, who will be the moderator for today's plenary.
Thanks so much, Kaida, and good morning, UNC, and welcome back to Thursday session. Thanks so much for coming back. It means a lot to all of us, sequenced later in the conference itself. I can see and I sense that there were a lot of people channeling A.Y. Young's energy last night, and you're bringing that to the conference today. I did have one big observation about last night and A.Y. Young. I sent the video of A.Y. Young dancing and bringing energy to the room to my son, and he wrote back to me straight away and he said, "Dad, this is fantastic, but you WASH nerds can't clap to a beat." And it was really true. I looked at the video and some of us are like really slow, some are going really fast, but none of us were on time. Now guys, if we want to hang out with the cool kids at school, we're going to have to do a better job all around. So we're going to have to bring that over the next year or so. Good. So my name's Darren Saywell. I work with the Millennium Water Alliance. I'm going to be your designated driver for today, your Uber driver, if you like, from climate vulnerability to climate resilience, which is the theme for this session. And I've got a few introductory remarks. We're then going to have a keynote presentation from Barbara, and then we're going to go into the panel. So I wanted to open my remarks by just talking a little bit about some of the connections to the previous panels, because I don't think we've mined that as well as we could have done. I think over the course of this week, the plenaries have taken us on a bit of a journey from Mondays looking at the dismantling of the development aid architecture and the resetting of norms, to Tuesdays focus on restructuring the role of the state in that changed environment, and to yesterday's session about the emergence of global health emergencies and the primacy of WASH to health security in this time of polycrisis. But I think that each of those sessions raised a common thread, and it's that the world that we work in is increasingly unstable. The norms that we've become used to have all changed, and that the assumptions that have often guided WASH planning, even over the last 5 years, are being rewritten somewhat in real time. So today's plenary and the theme of climate resilience and WASH takes that reality head on by asking, how can we measure, how can we monitor, and how can we strengthen climate resilience in WASH? And climate change just isn't a background condition anymore. It's becoming the defining variable for whether WASH systems can endure. Resilience isn't about just surviving those droughts or those floods. It's about whether our systems, our institutions, our communities can anticipate, adapt, evolve, and recover from uncertainty. I think it really means asking more than just, can our infrastructure cope? It's more about, can governance, finance, and data systems keep services functional when the future doesn't behave like the past? So all of this matters because I think good WASH is foundational to climate resilience and not the other way around. Safe, reliable water and sanitation are what allow households to absorb shocks, to protect their health, to sustain livelihoods, and to recover faster from those stresses which seem to be coming all the more regularly. Without those resilient WASH systems, every climate impact becomes a health and development crisis. So over the next 90 minutes or so, I think we're going to unpack that and see what it looks like in practice. Barbara Evans from the University of Leeds is going to be providing a bit of a framing presentation for us to sort of set the scene, give us a bit of a baseline to go by. And she's going to be looking and examining how we currently understand and measure resilience across the WASH system, from infrastructure to institutions and user experience. And then we're going to go into a panel discussion, which will have 2 or 3 parts, and we'll look at and explore how to operationalize those ideas as we think about policy, finance, and action. So we're going to hand over to Barbara now, if I can invite her up. Barbara's been in the sort of vanguard of thinking on climate resilience for some time, and we thought it would be really good for her to sort of set the scene with her keynote presentation. So Barbara, over to you.
Thanks very much, Darren. Good morning, everybody. I was kind of hoping you were going to get them to clap, but, you know. No. Not like that, like this. See, they can do it. Yay, well done, well done. Okay, cool, very good, well done. Okay, so I'm going to try and give a very brief framing on this enormous topic, just to think about measuring climate resilience in WASH. I'm going to put my talk together in 3 parts, and I want to just acknowledge the leadership of Juliet Willits at UTS in Sydney, who's done a lot of really helpful thinking on this topic, and a huge number of people. So as usual, as a professor, I'm essentially just channeling other people's good ideas and trying to make myself look good. So I'm just going to say we need to think about, when we think about measuring or thinking about resilience, we have to think about 3 things. The first thing we have to think about is resilience of what? And I think the immediate thing that a lot of WASH people tend to do is to think about, well, I'm interested in making sure that my infrastructure remains resilient under stress and that there's a decent service outcome. That's the kind of, you know, bread and butter question that we usually sort of start with is, you know, what type of toilet should I build and how likely is it to continue to provide services? If we broaden out slightly, we might think that the service provider, whoever that might be, public sector, private sector, might have a role to play in ensuring that that infrastructure is built and maintained in appropriate ways. I think sometimes we're pushed quite hard to recognize that WASH fits within the wider water system. So obviously the attributes of the water system in the watershed have a link somehow to this resilience problem. We might think that the way that service providers behave is something to do with the policy, institutions, regulation and financial structures at government level, be it central government or local government. If we're old enough to remember thinking about environmental sanitation, we're going to think about coordination with drainage and solid waste, and particularly actions which enable government to connect together water resources and WASH service delivery. If we're really radical and advanced and kind of like down with the kids, we might also think that the user experience of all of this is really important. It's not just, does your service keep running, but how much stress and uncertainty do you experience, even whether your service is working or not. And that makes us also think that users themselves have a role to play in this whole ecosystem. So just to say, this is a very simple sort of version of a framework that we've used for the work we're doing currently to develop global indicators on climate resilient WASH. And the kind of headline of this is that essentially it's the WASH system at large that has to be resilient, not just one part of it, not just the piece of infrastructure, not just the users, but the whole ecosystem. And I just want to say that this sort of systems thinking exists everywhere in climate resilience. We've looked at a huge amount of climate resilience literature from other sectors. This is just from the insurance sector, actually, that essentially in the insurance world, adaptation is mainly used to describe behavioral phenomena in response to external incentives and climate change. And I think that's a really interesting framing. You know, we're interested in the way that all the people inside the system are behaving in response to climate change, and what are the interventions that we can put in place to modify those behaviors to end up with a more resilient system. So we're probably interested in resilience throughout the WASH system and in the systems around it. So we have to be really literate about the climate stresses that exist and the other factors around the WASH system. So, you know, housing, transport planning, supply chains, early warning systems, disaster risk management, all of those things actually matter and feed into resilience in the WASH system. Second question we have to ask is resilience to what? What kind of climate effects really matter? And actually I would say here that when we're measuring climate resilience, we're not actually usually measuring resilience to climate change. We're measuring resilience to extreme events which are a function of climate change. And there are two types, broadly. There are rapid onset events. These are the ones that get thought about more, I would say. Typically floods, wildfires, storms, the hurricane that's currently affecting the Caribbean. These can cause rapid, destructive damage. They may have really complicated spillover effects because populations may be displaced. So suddenly we're talking about wash service provision, not where people started, but where they end up. But the thing about these is that they generally have a fairly clear boundary in time and space. So in fact, it's going to be easiest for us to learn about resilience to these types of events because we can see them and we can measure before and after effects. From a measurement point of view, slow onset events are actually tougher. So droughts and sea level rises, these are genuine climate change effects, obviously, but the effects are slower, they're less dramatic. They have very, very serious consequences, but they may impact on parts of the system, and then the system may be very damaged before you see the effect of some of these slow onset events. They don't have clear boundaries in time and space, so they're very hard to distinguish from operational variation. So really understanding how we adapt to these slow onset events is one of the tougher stories. Also, a lot of the policy responses here are very tough because it's often about radically changing the way we organize our services. I think this gives me the opportunity also to note that something we don't talk about enough in climate resilience in the WASH sector is that there are some places which are going to become untenable. It will not be possible to live in some places. And I think we can't, we're sometimes trying to make WASH systems resilient to almost sort of unsurvivable effects. So, a good example is where you have really severe sea level rise effects. If you can't give people sustained, robust housing, you probably can't give them sustained, robust WASH services. And the final question we have to ask is resilience for what? Like, what is our resilience ambition? I just want to draw attention to the work that the SWA have done on defining climate resilience. They have these verbs. I think they've been mentioned a few times. So the SWA definition has 7 verbs, but the first 4 are anticipate, respond to, cope with, and recover from. So that is the idea of resilience in the status quo. But I think we also have to think about the fact that this is, as Darren said, this is our new reality. So we also need to think about the extent to which our actions to achieve resilience are about adapting and transforming so that our systems actually work in the new reality. This is all much harder because we're generally asking people to reinvent the system. And this is true for high-income countries and low-income countries. This is our work for the next 25 years, and it's really hard. It's very difficult to measure resilience. Household experiences matter. And it would be really good to understand a lot about what's going on at household level, but we know there's a decline in funding, less money for household surveys. There are new tools, but we've really got to think smartly about how we track these effects at the household level. Policy, institutions, regulations, finance, all of these things are important. They're a bit hard to measure as well because sometimes it's a bit difficult to just say, yes, we have a policy. The question is, do we have a policy that's really gripping? So we really need to be able to track the effect of policy. And I'm also not picking on Nigeria here. I just really love this picture because everyone's so happy about their new policy. I hope nobody in Nigeria thinks I'm being rude about Nigerian policy. And of course, we also have to engage with the climate sector to really understand climate change is very complicated and climate effects are very, very complex. This is a really neat tool that was developed by my university to predict intense storms in West Africa, and it's used directly by transport providers, the ferry company on Lake Victoria. All sorts of people use this to predict their business, and the WASH sector doesn't use this type of tool yet, but we could be using this type of tool. And why are we even elevating climate in the WASH debate? So a lot of people say, well, we've got enough business to do anyway. Just achieving access to safely managed is hard enough. Why climate? Maybe climate resilient WASH is simply good WASH, and that is sometimes true. But for what it's worth, there are some specific things that we can do to increase the likelihood that WASH services can be maintained, and there's a small emerging area of evidence on this. And I think we also have to make acknowledgement to some countries which are really transforming the way they think about wash services. This is a photograph of a new wastewater treatment facility in Sweden, parts of Sweden which are really grappling with the idea that you need to start separating your sewer systems, reinvesting in drainage, changing the way we manage waste flows. That's a big transformational piece of work in the urban space. But fundamentally, it's about securing the ability to provide public health benefits through sanitation for the next 50 years. I would say we shouldn't be worrying about whether we can afford to do climate change in WASH. I think, as Darren said, good WASH is foundational to climate resilience. And so we don't have a choice. We have to do this. We have to work out how to make services which are going to last. We've got work to do for the next 50 years, and this is the reality of the next 50 years. Thank you very much. I think that's my last slide.
Thank you, Barbara. So thanks, Barbara. And if you could sit there, that would be great. We've asked Barbara to stay with the panel because we think there'll be some Slido questions for her, and there'll be an opportunity for her to provide some rejoinders. And I'd like to call up our other panelists who are here in real life today. Rick Johnston from WHO, Stivers Kathuni from Millennium Water Alliance, and Sasha Kramer from Soil, based in Haiti. And we're going to get into it in a minute. Just to remind you about Slido, we have a couple of Slido gurus in the front here who are going to be taking your questions and curating them, clustering them, and then feeding them up. So please do scan that QR code. I think you know the drill by now, and we feel it's been working reasonably well. So we look forward to your questions. Remember that a good question is a short question that finishes with a question mark. So thank you for observing that simple life lesson, if you like. So I'm going to come and join the group in a moment. You've seen their bios in the program book, so I'm not going to talk any more about that. Please look into their bios because they're fantastic. But I just wanted to sort of comment a little bit first on Barbara's presentation and sort of helping to remind us that climate resilience isn't a single metric. It's really the property of the WASH system as a whole, from the watershed to the household. And I quite liked your framing that perhaps climate resilient WASH is just good WASH with add-ons, with done with foresight, with grounded in evidence, and mindful of some uncertainty. And so some of those thoughts are the thoughts that we're going to be bringing into this panel discussion for the next half an hour or so. I'm very happy that we've got our three panelists in real life here. We also have another panelist, as you saw in the base slide, Leonie Hyde-Smith. She's from Hamburg-Wasser. She's apologized that she's not able to be here, but she has sent a couple of video contributions, which we're really excited about, and I'm also personally really nervous about, because we also know that conferences and video contributions remotely go really well, don't they? With no glitches and no problems. So we'll see how that works, but we've staged those discussions. Last thing to say is this discussion, or this bit of our plenary session, is going to be in a three-part conversation. We're going to have first bit around the sort of defining and measuring climate resilience. Then going to talk about some examples of integrating resilience into programming and implementation. And then we'll talk about a little bit about how we elevate WASH in climate discussions. So that's what we're going to move into. If we go into the first of those bits about defining and measuring climate resilience, I think one of the things we want to do in this section is try to unpack some definitions or build on how Barbara had framed it, maybe think about some of the dimensions of climate resilience, think about the evidence base needed to capture it. But I really wanted to start this segment with grounding the discussion immediately in some concrete reality, and that's where I'm going to ask in a moment to bring up the video from Leonie Hyde-Smith. I think she sets a bit of a baseline for the conversation in defining and measuring resilience. She sits in Germany in a resource-rich environment, but we wanted to bring that sort of counterpoint perspective into the discussion because I think it's instructive about the sort of universality of climate resilience. She's going to be talking about her utility perspective on how to define and measure resilience, starting with integrated urban planning, and you'll hear a little bit in the couple of minutes of this video contribution about how she's coordinating a partnership that deals with stormwater management, wastewater management, and water supply management to strengthen resilience. So Bart, if we could queue up Leonie's input, that would be great. Thank you.
Climate resilient in WASH means that we need to think about urban systems and the urban water cycle in an integrated way. And that sounds like a cliche, but if we look at the impacts of climate change, we cannot separate wastewater or sanitation from stormwater management and water supply. At Hamburg Wasser, I work in the unit of stormwater management, and I coordinate a water operators partnership with the municipality of Stellenbosch in South Africa. And the focus of this collaboration is blue-green infrastructure and nature-based solutions for stormwater and greywater management and reuse. Hamburg and Stellenbosch are obviously quite different contexts, but there are parallels. In Hamburg, as a utility, we are mainly concerned about the frequency and the magnitude of extreme weather events like cloudbursts. Our sewer systems are designed for 5-year events. More intense storms can cause flooding of roads, of cellars, and therefore also costly damages. In part of the city, we have a combined sewer system that is over 150 years old, and that's obviously already under pressure. And as the city is still growing, city development adds impermeable surfaces, which then create more runoff and more pressure on the system. In Stellenbosch, I guess the first thing that comes to mind in terms of climate change is water security. We can all recall the fear of day zero in 2017. However, there has also been a disastrous flooding event in Franschhoek in 2 years ago. There are huge challenges with drainage, with greywater and wastewater management in the informal settlement, which means that there are uncontrolled and untreated flows of greywater and probably partly also black water through informal communities. And these pose public health and environmental risk on a normal day, and we can all imagine what happens when there is extreme rainfall and flooding. So to become more resilient, the first thing that we need is good data and good information. So just to name an example, in Hamburg, we have an interactive online platform that visualizes areas at risk of heavy rainfall, flooding, and that enables then urban planners, businesses, or residents to assess local flooding hazards and think about climate adaptation planning for these areas.
Great, thanks very much, Leonie. We're sort of disappointed, if you're online, disappointed you can't be with us, but thank you for that. And I think it helps sort of set the frame a little bit for this discussion. I think it's a crucial starting point and shows that in the sort of high resource setting that Leonie's working in, measuring resilience begins with the integration of WASH into citywide governance and planning, which I think is a core indicator itself. She's again reinforcing that resilience must be defined as a system-wide capacity. But I think, moving to Stivers in a moment, and I know that there's a slide that we want to bring up, an image that Stivers will talk to. But I think one of the things we want to do is to sort of stress test those types of definitions. Does that work in all contexts? Hamburg Wasser is obviously in a resource-rich environment. So Stivers, I'm hoping we could start with you. Bart, if we could bring up that image, that would be great. I wondered if you could talk a little bit from your field-based experience. You see some of the environment that Stivers and the team are working in here. Could you talk a little bit about your thinking on climate resilience in the context of WASH, and what are the essential dimensions that need to be measured to capture its multifaceted nature?
Yeah, thank you, Darren, and really honored to participate in this distinguished panel. I think Barbara set the stage very well in terms of explaining or defining what is climate resilience WASH. But the image you're looking at is a photo that I took last year in June, and this was after 2 months. I think it between May, actually March, April, and May, this community had experienced flash floods, and it was flooding that had happened just before, actually just after 2.5 years of failed rains. 5 seasons of failed rains, so 5 seasons basically is 2.5 years of no drop of rain in this community. And I was really surprised to see that after 2.5 years of no rain, you get 2 months of rain, and the community looks like what you see there. One of the things that you see there also at the bottom of that photo is that there's a boy who's walking to a water point. This is in June, just after 1 month of having rains and floods that's really wreaked havoc in this community. And he's walking to a water point where he's going to fetch water. And why is he making this walk, what I call a walk of faith? He's walking to a water point because the surface water sources just near his home have just dried up, or some of them are really contaminated, and they can't use that water for their household use. But also because there was an NGO or some other government intervention that brought in some water kiosks or water systems or water supply systems in their village, which ended up being non-functional at the moment when they need to be functioning. So, and what I mean about that is because this boy has to make these several kilometers of a walk to get water from the source, because the pipeline that brings water closer to his home is not working. But the other thing that you see in that photo are mountains and trees, which is a receding tree line, whereby the community has to cut these trees to get firewood for their to boil their water. Basically, it's food fuel to boil their water and really treat their water. That's the main way of how they treat their water. But also the mountains in the background bring all the flash floods. Rain water falling there, or hitting those mountains would really flood and come to this community. So in my perspective, looking at this photo, and when I stood up somewhere up there taking this photo, I was just thinking about, what can we do for this boy? Why does this boy have to make this walk every day? And many other boys do this, and from a wider scale perspective, the government of Kenya had started talking about the drought, how it was bad, how 5 million Kenyans needed support in terms of food aid. We had about 2.5 million livestock that had been lost because of drought. And then in 2 months you have floods, and then now everyone is going back. The cyclic events that we see here. For me, climate resilience wash is when this boy doesn't have to make this walk. When this boy and his family don't have to live in fear of the floods. When this boy and this community, and many boys in these similar communities, rural, urban setups, know that the watershed is working for them to bring the water to the tap. I think a watershed to tap scenario is really, really critical in how we as players and actors and different players across the scope are taking their responsibilities, right? Doing the right things to make sure this is not happening. So climate resilience for me is that work not happening at all. The other part of your question, I think, talks about what are some of the things that we should be measuring, I think. Some of the key dimensions we should be talking about. I think 2 things here come into mind for me. One being, we need to continue understanding the hazard more. I think lack of preparation, lack of having the right data, and I like what we've seen there in terms of some of the tools and technology that could be used, are really critical to making sure that we are understanding or getting to understand the hazard better, getting to talk about it and also publish about it, and let those who need to know about how to prepare have the right data to make the right decisions. And finally, I think in my day job, I deal with institutions that I feel are not prepared. And sorry for saying that, but I feel there needs to be more of an assessment around the capacity of some of our institutions that we trust, that they should be doing the job of responding, of early warning, preparedness, response, and resilience building, that should be better prepared to respond. This is in terms of not just making budgets available in terms of paper, but making the funds available when they're needed to be available. So a lot of institution capacity preparedness and assessments also need to go into that to make all this really a holistic response mechanism. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much, Stivers. And I was just thinking, you used the word in the last sentence, the holistic response is something that's coming through strongly there. You talked also about data, about institutions. Rick, I wanted to pivot to you and think about data in relation to indicators, indicators themselves. I mean, from the sort of monitoring data policy perspective at WHO that you have, could you talk about any indicators or frameworks that you feel show a lot of promise in capturing the sort of multidimensional nature of resilience in a way that governments can use to be accountable and to use for planning purposes?
Thanks, Darren. Yeah, this is something that we've been working on together with UNICEF and a range of partners. I think for many years it's been agreed that we need to do climate resilient wash. It's the issue of our time. We need to move towards it. But there's not been agreement about what that means or how you can measure it. Mm-hmm. So SWA has made a good contribution by coming up with this definition of climate resilient wash that Barbara showed briefly with the 6 different verbs. But over the past year and a half, WHO and UNICEF, the JMP and GLASS teams, have been engaged in a review process along with Barbara Evans and a consortium of eminent academics. It's been a privilege to work with them to see what frameworks are people using or proposing to use, what indicators, what data are being used, what evidence is there that these things that are proposed to increase climate resilience actually do increase climate resilience. So Barbara and the academic team of very smart people started with literature reviews, gray literature, published review, what people are using in the field, and that led to a list of 600 indicatory things, many of which are not really indicators, many of which have not been actually implemented in the field, but still, that's what the sector is saying would be important. And we've worked with the team, we've worked with some external advisors to whittle that set of 600 down to something more manageable and that we think that the JMP and GLASS teams might be able to work with going forward. Mm-hmm. So we just had an interesting session right before this of a proposed global shortlist of 42 indicators that span that whole framework that Barbara showed briefly, going from having policies all the way to what service providers are doing, what the functions of services are at the end, and the user experience on the other end. So we've tried to populate those different parts of that conceptual framework with indicators or proto-indicators that we think can be developed into meaning indicators that are still practical enough to be monitored, but useful enough to inform and improve service delivery and climate resilience. So let me give you just a couple examples.
Yeah, please.
Many of them are on the upstream policy side of things, because a lot of resilience is about preparedness and plannings. So there are proposed indicators about having plans in place, national adaptation plans reflecting WASH. Also about standards in place. Are there standards and guidelines around design and construction, operation and maintenance that incorporate current and future climate? And also, if there are shocks, are there standards about recovery? How much time does it take to reestablish service? That's all on the policy side. But then we'd like to see those mirrored when it comes to service providers. So if there's a standard that says there should be risk-based management plans that incorporate climate projections, okay, when you come to the utility or the service provider or the regulator that is responsible for service delivery, are they using a water safety plan, a sanitation safety plan that does incorporate climate? And then when you come to the actual quality of services being delivered, there's a whole set of indicators around disruption and damage and coping mechanisms. So if there are disruptions, are there alternates in place that people can make use of? And that gets us into those user experiences. What are people doing when there are disruptions? Are they able to find some kind of alternative that's adequate? And right on to those experiences, whether they're accessing their normal or alternative services, are they worried about having enough water to meet their needs? Do they feel safe when they're accessing sanitation facilities that might not be the ones that they normally use? And on the hygiene side, are people still able to practice hygiene? Are they able to practice menstrual hygiene management in the face of disruptions to services? So it's an ambitious package. But it's one that we feel has potential, and if you weren't in our session this morning, please go back and watch the recording or come to our webinar next week.
Shameless self-promotion
Yeah.
for other events, but thanks very much, Rick. I like the idea that there are 600 indicatory things out there that you've whittled down to a smaller number. That'll be the scientific term for these things. Sasha, I wanted to come to you. There's a two-part question here. I'd like you, secondarily, to sort of react to some of the indicators that Rick has just talked about, or at least the themes of those, from a implementing perspective in Haiti, and sort of give us your perspective on that. But I mean, I'd also like you to start with, from soil's perspective, how do you see resilience manifest at the community and service levels that you're working at, which are very, very different from the context that Leonie started us on?
Absolutely, thank you. And it is a real pleasure to be here today. I'm also very happy to be with this panel. I am wishing that my legs were as long as you two, because if I sit back, I kind of look like that. So I can't quite sit as comfortably. But it is an honor to be here. And I was very struck in listening to Leonie speak about Germany and also South Africa. And I work as a sanitation service provider in Haiti. So I think between those three contexts, we have a real range of relative wealth and sort of ability to respond. And I will circle back to this question of policies and standards and how do those manifest on the ground, because I think it's quite linked to the financial ability to follow those. But I do want to tell you a little bit about what's happening right now, today in Haiti, because Hurricane Melissa, though it did not go directly over Haiti, there have been significant impacts. And our team works in northern Haiti, and we were very lucky not to get hit very hard. But because we did know it was coming, we did roll out all of the preparation that we would when we're anticipating a flooding event. So from, I think we have a lot of folks on this panel with a very high-level perspective. I'm now going to take you down into my very, very niche experience, which is sanitation service provision and informal settlements in Haiti using container-based sanitation. And its niche, container-based sanitation itself was designed for climate resilience. But let me just tell you what's happened over the last few days when we know that a flood might be coming. We reach out to all of our customers and we say, if it floods, you need to seal up your containers, get them out of the flood water, and we will stay in communication with you and let you know when we can get there to collect those containers. And this has worked through, I would say that our operating model at Soil is one of constant adaptation. And so this has been through years of experiences of floods that we've figured out, okay, this is a way to let our customers know. Our customers are aware of this. They know we're going to get in there as soon as we can. But then at the community level, what you see in vulnerable communities is that there is very much a culture of mutual aid. So people are helping one another. They don't expect that anyone else is going to come help them. So if your neighbor's home floods, you go next door and they will offer you aid. And we see that collaboration with our community partners. So I wish I had the video to show you, but as a transport-based service, we can only get so far into communities during floods. And what we see is we see our customers walking through those floodwaters with their containers to get them out to the truck because they know that they need to get that waste out of the community. So I think that, I'm very curious, the second part of the question of how do we kind of have standards and indicators around that? And I told Rick I was probably just going to turn it around on him and say, well, what would you do with them? What would we track with communities? And how would we use that? How would that be helpful? Because I do think in Haiti, there are policies. And Haiti has been hit by so many natural disasters that there are response plans in place. But if there's not the resources to build a shelter, even though people know the hurricane is coming, they've got nowhere to go. And so that's why I think you see this very differential ability to be resilient that's very much based on the resources you have. And we see that right now. I mean, the storm went directly over Jamaica, and as of today, the casualty toll is 4 people in Jamaica and over 25 in Haiti, and Haiti wasn't even hit. And so I just think it's really important to think about, you know, even if you have those policies in place, can you enact them? And that depends on your resources.
Great, thanks very much, Sasha. I wanted to sort of move to the next bit of our conversation in the interest of time, where we look at moving beyond that sort of definitional or measurement discussion that we've just had, and think a little bit more about how we integrate resilience into programming. I think measurement sort of only gets us so far. It matters if it drives change. So I think in this part, we'll really be talking about how WASH actors can move towards that type of impact that we need to achieve through different forms of integration of resilience into policies, institutions, and financing. And to start with, I think, again, we'd like Leonie's video contribution here from Hamburg Wasser. She has a short video that talks about cross-sector collaboration as a core component of this discussion, including how utilities are partnering with different stakeholders to physically embed resilience into the city's infrastructure. So if we could queue up and play Leonie's second video, that would be great.
From a utility perspective, rainwater doesn't just fall into sewers. It first lands on roofs, on pavement, on parking lots. And that means that we need to work with households, with developers, with businesses, and with municipal agencies. But that collaboration isn't always easy. To start with a positive example, in Hamburg, there is a well-established joint initiative between the environmental agency and Hamburg Wasser as the utility to adapt rainwater infrastructure. And that includes citizen guidance, an incentive program, for example, providing subsidies for private rainwater systems, facilitation of blue-green stormwater infrastructure in schools, collaboration to create multifunctional retention spaces, for example, at sports facilities or on playgrounds, and even competition for ideas for de-sealing of public spaces. However, while everybody loves the idea of the sponge city, it also comes at a cost, and the costs and benefits are often asymmetrically distributed, which means that there are competing interests between households, developers, the municipality, and the utility. For example, installing infrastructure like green roofs or green building facades or permeable surfaces may benefit the citizens, the environment, us as a utility, but developers face higher upfront costs, and they then might want to pass that down to future residents, while there is an immense pressure to create affordable housing in the city. A related issue is space. Again, these sponge principles, infiltration, retention, evapotranspiration, all need room to function, and in dense areas, this can be a really tough sell. So we are back to the idea of city resilience as a system, and within the system, exchange and collaboration becomes absolutely essential.
Great, thanks again, Leonie. If we could have the lights up. I think one of the things that Leonie's talked about there is the importance of integration isn't just technical, it's also institutional and social, and that when integration is done right, the solution itself becomes somewhat multi-sectoral. I wanted to use that then as the basis to sort of pivot and talk a little bit about this process of integration, collaboration, and influence with the panel themselves. Barbara, I might ask you to come in here as well, if you have a moment. Sasha, I wanted to start with you. I mean, the environment you work in is radically different from the environment that Sasha is working in, but I think it's equally powerful in terms of examples that are possibly relevant for integration here. And for those who don't know, Soil in Haiti works on a circular sanitation economy model, converting waste into agricultural resource. So I wondered, in the context of climate resilience, I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how this approach sort of simultaneously strengthens the local WASH service resilience against climate shocks, and also contributes to broader climate adaptation efforts.
I can give it a try. Yesterday we did a session and we were doing a lot. Oh, we should have done some of that. Stand up, sit down. It was pretty fun. And you ask a question and make everyone stand up. And one of them was, how many people in this room knew that they were going into WASH before they started their, after high school? And many people sat down because so many of us have sort of stumbled into the field from elsewhere. And that was very much my experience. My training is in ecology, and so and specifically biogeochemistry. So as we were designing the technology and the service, it really was designed to be holistic and to bring different sectors together and to sort of rebuild these broken nutrient cycles in a way that is climate positive, both in the sense of adaptation, but also reducing emissions from sanitation. And I think that having this circular model has been an incredible tool for us in Haiti in terms of bringing together different sectors to discuss these interlinkages between sectors. So because we're transforming human waste into compost that can then be applied to soils, that means the Ministry of Agriculture maybe takes an interest in sanitation and might want to come and speak with us about climate resilience. And because compost helps with infiltration, it means that it's actually impacting water supply. So not only food security, but it is circling back to have WASH adaptation impacts. So I do think that using sort of a holistic approach to WASH means that we get into conversations with people who usually would overlook what we do. And that wasn't the goal when we designed this, but that has certainly been an outcome of that.
Okay. Thanks. Are you finding that cross-sectoral talk, that there's different language used? Do you have to raise awareness about how to explain what's happening in the WASH or sanitation sector with colleagues in adjacent sectors? Is there a difference in language that you're having to bridge here?
I would say certainly, and just in general, there's been a complete overlooking of WASH from other sectors. I think the easiest sector, and in many countries, WASH will fall under the public health department, but in Haiti, it doesn't. So I think that's kind of the sector where they are most aware because they see those impacts immediately. And again, we're seeing that today in Haiti. There is an ongoing cholera epidemic, and I do expect to see spikes after this. In terms of different language, it's a good question. I'm not sure. I think it's just more a question of we were working in silos and we weren't talking to one another. And so we've been able to kind of bring people together. And when we sit together, I find we have the same language. We just never sat together before.
It's a good segue for my next question to Stivers, which is about how do we work across different domains between a climate and disaster resilience sector. So I think based on your experiences in Kenya, could you talk about what you see as the critical overlaps between climate and disaster resilience and how they can be leveraged more effectively for WASH? And within that, whether you see, are there any particular barriers, institutional, financial, or other, that you faced when you've tried to integrate or work around or work between those two areas?
Yeah, thank you, Darren. And I think when we talk about some of the climate events or the extreme events here, all these events are basically disasters, and the point here is that if they are then disasters, so some of the frameworks that apply in disaster risk reduction then do apply in climate resilience work. So we're talking about floods, storms, and all wildfires, and all these are really all disasters in their own definition. I see some of the frameworks, for example, preparedness and early warning, all this being applicable. And in terms of WASH leveraging the integration of climate resilience and disaster risk reduction, I think the opportunities there, mainly one from the financing perspective, when you're trying to address or allocating funds for climate change or climate resilience, you're technically also allocating funds that can also be addressing issues to do with WASH. What Sasha is talking about in terms of sanitation issues in Haiti, I think I see if funds are being allocated for climate resilience in terms of protecting these communities if it's a flood, then you're also trying to protect the same sanitation facilities that do exist in these villages. So there's a bit of overlap there, and we can take advantage, especially to leverage on financing that does exist or is being planned for. But the other part of it is in terms of coordination and governance. Most of the time, I know I've attended many coordination meetings with WASH sector, what they call WASH sector meetings. And I'm sure if you called for a climate resilience meeting, the same people possibly would be the same people showing up. I would show up in a climate resilience workshop because I think it's so relevant to me. It's not just being a water sector player, but also it's because it is relevant what discussions are happening there because they tie to, or they're linked to part of the resilience work that we're trying to do in WASH. So I think coordination too would be another very critical piece that then we can leverage on. But also the data pieces in terms of monitoring, there's a lot of monitoring pieces that are going into, or data collection points. I think Barbara spoke about some of this and how they're being used, weather being one of them. With some of our partners, for example, the Montesson Center for Global Engineering and Resilience at the University of Colorado Boulder is now working on taking some of the weather or climate data and looking at that in terms of how it's impacting some of the groundwater sources or the aquifers that are mainly used to support some of the communities we work with. So it's how these data and monitoring systems then are being used for early warning that is also important for WASH players, bringing other data points, for example, the functionality of water points that we do a lot with one of our partners that's known as Viridi, where we're putting in water monitoring sensors that are telling us how our systems functioning. Are they functioning? What is the seasonality in terms of functionality of some of these systems? And we see some of the systems being very strained when these drought events happened or when flood events happened, and then that type of data also becomes very critical in planning and response and resilience building. The other part of that is also in terms, there are many water quality parameters around that. So water contamination is also a critical piece, but how to make sure that we're also collecting data, but also using that data and leveraging on the data that could be collected by other partners, could be in the public health side of things, to really advise responses in WASH, I think, is really critical. Mm-hmm. But to the institutions, barriers, I think in my experience, coming from an NGO side, I see us being very misunderstood. Whenever we show up in government offices, we are seeing government offices looking at us as NGOs, as people who are coming to us for support, but also not as partners. Until we get to a point where we're looking at it from a partnership perspective, that is when I think it really starts to get to the integration that we're talking about here. One of the things we are doing as the Millennium Water Alliance is trying to see how best to collocate our staff. Having our staff sit with the government officials, plan with them, implement the plans, budget with them, co-finance activities with them, I think is one piece of how we are addressing the barriers around institution integration. And that really helps us for them to see us differently, to see us as partners and not just any other donor or a partner who's just in the room. The second piece of that is in terms of financing barriers, I think we're also trying to diversify how we are financing some of our activities. One of the things we're doing is really tapping into carbon financing work, getting into thinking through carbon finance. How do we use the water sector, generate credits from the water sector and sell those and bring back financing that comes to support the sector? So really a loaded question, but I think there are ways around it, but also there are lots of back to the integration story. I think that's really, really critical. Thank you.
Thanks so much. In the interest of time, Rick, if you don't mind, I'm going to allow you to kick off the next segment of our discussion because I want to make sure that we come to our Slido gurus. I'm hoping we have some interesting questions for the group. And I'm going to truncate this third section a little bit because I want to make sure we get time for audience participation. And the way in which I'm going to do that, this third section is about elevating WASH in the climate discussion, is to put you all horribly on the spot and come up with a distillation of years of experience in one sound bite. I'm going to run across that. Obviously, one of the things, just to frame this, one of the things that we know is that, all of our work in this space is going to be limited if the wash sector still remains a peripheral player in the debate around the climate issues. We know that wash is fundamental to climate adaptation, but it still struggles to get attention in those high-level climate policy and finance discussions. So what I'm hoping that you could do in one sentence, and I'll start with you, Rick, is what single step, whether it's on measurement, integration, policy, or anything else, do you think is going to help the wash sector decisively move from where it is, which is sort of simply surviving climate change, to being actively driving climate resilience? And that maybe gives us a little bit of a way to get to this point of elevating wash while saving a little bit of time in the session. So I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Darren. Well, not surprising. I'm a data guy. I'm a monitoring guy. So my top-line message is going to be that indicators matter and that they can drive improvements. And new indicators, I want to look at the SDG experience here, where back in 2015, a whole raft of new indicators for more ambitious levels of service were brought in, bringing in water quality, wastewater treatment, things like that, that weren't part of the MDGs. And many countries are still internalizing these, still struggle to measure them. But even in places where they're not routinely measured and monitored, they still are an entry point to discussions, and they can influence programming. Mm-hmm. So we've seen countries and development partners reorient their rural wash programs to consider quality, to bring water closer to users, because those weren't part of the MDG frameworks. So all of this takes time. But I feel like if we can get to some kind of global consensus about what needs to be monitored to be climate resilient, we will make progress towards climate resilience even before we get climate resilient figures in the next JMP report.
Thank you. I'm going to swap and go over to Barbara and see whether I can put you on the spot now with your thinking for this.
2 sentences. In high-income countries with aging infrastructure, we have to have a really serious conversation about rebuilding our infrastructure, and we are nowhere close to having the conversation about how much that costs. In generally low-income countries where we're closer to the beginning of a process of major investment that rolls out good wash, that's the place where we can seize the day and roll out climate-resilient good wash. Mm-hmm. Both times we have to talk about cost, but I think it's easier in the second case than the first.
Thanks. Sasha?
I was going to say I'm going to try for one sentence, but then I started with a sentence. I think that you said that at WASH meetings and climate meetings are the same people. So we go to their meeting and we say, hey, you know what, we can help you mitigate against climate change, and you cannot adapt to climate change without us. So come to our meeting.
Thank you. Stivers, last word.
Yeah, I think for me it's how to frame WASH being so central to human development. I think it's so important to bring it to show how WASH contributes to human development, basically. From the food security perspective, all we're doing with water for food security, and to the health perspective, what we're doing in terms of avoiding diarrhea diseases and all the health outbreaks and the cholera cases, that is really important. I think just framing that without WASH, really, all these other things get affected, and really you would be investing or spending more to address many other issues that were not there if you would have, or would not have happened if you had addressed WASH. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a nice segue to come into hopefully some concluding thoughts and shaping thoughts that give us a bridge to Jan Willem, and who's our Slido guru for today.
All right, Slido guru. We have a lot of questions, and to start with, and we haven't been able to get them all to the site where everybody sees them, and so I would like to suggest to the panel, if you have any time to stay after, and people that don't see their question asked, there are a couple of really specific kind of question to JMP about specifics, that kind of stuff. Like, come talk over here. The questions we wanted to share with the panel, one is from Nikki Benke for Barbara and other researchers, asking within this framework of making the whole WASH system more climate resilient, where are the biggest research gaps that we still need to work on? Research gaps, that's what I said? Oh, sorry, not resource gaps, research gaps. Then there are some questions about measurement and JMP. How do JMP standards reconcile critical climate resilient infrastructure like high quality shared sanitation that are not currently recognized as basic service levels? And somewhat related, if indicators can't be met due to lack of resources or natural disasters and other interruptions, how should donors and implementers respond to that, and how do we define success in that setting? I have one more if we can, and then I'll hand it over to the panel. Can you take that second one? Let me see where that was. It's like as people vote, things move on my screen, so I...
Democracy.
All right, there is an anonymous question about, do you see a potential trade-off between climate resilient WASH services and anticipatory insurance, or is there a role for both? And I'm going to leave it to that with the panel, except that I'm going to ask the panel to clarify one thing. There are a number of questions that clearly deal with climate response, which is what your climate adaptation, which is what you're talking about. But then there's also climate mitigation, and it might be helpful if you could spend 2 sentences on telling us what the difference is and who's responsible for what.
Okay, so Barbara, could you take the first of those questions?
The research one?
The research one?
Yes, so the research question, there's a lot of research needed. When we did the reviews for the JMP GLASS study, we found an infinity of assertion and a dearth of evidence. So if you are young researchers and you want to get into this field, we don't need another framework, we don't need another scaled something or other, whatchamacallit. What we need are things to be tested for how well they perform under basically extreme weather events, whether they're slow onset or rapid onset. So more implementation science and a little bit less assertion. I mean, and I'm probably as guilty as anyone else, so I'm not criticizing others. I mean, it's hard research to do because climate events are complex and difficult, but we really need the evidence. And I would say that's evidence about performance and also impact, because we really need to make this case. I think several people talked about this. So if we can link that to, showing the benefits of not having your system collapse under increasing intensity of rainfall, that would be really helpful. Thanks.
Rick, I'm going to turn to you for the measurement and the JMP related question. It's natural habitat for you.
Yep. Thank you. Woo. Thank goodness. No climate finance for me, please. Well, around the SDG indicators and the question about basic sanitation and shared sanitation, if I bring it into the climate resilience space, I mean, there's a whole package we've been talking about of indicators that are kind of parallel to the ongoing work on sustainable development goals. And in kind of routine SDG practice, shared sanitation doesn't count as basic because of concerns about health and privacy and dignity, et cetera. But we've always agreed that there's a need for quality shared sanitation in certain settings, at least as interim measures. And I think when we look at that with a climate resilient lens, a lot of resilience is about having backup plans in place, having redundancy, so that when your routine service is disrupted, you're able to substitute with something, but also with something that meets minimum quality standards. So I think the example of quality shared sanitation, community toilets, public toilets, would be really good for community resilience in anticipation of disruptions to routine sanitation services.
Great, thank you. And then we've got a couple of questions. I don't know, Sasha and Stivers, whether you wanted to dig into either of those. One about differences between mitigation, adaptation, the other around the trade-off question.
Oh, I wanted to speak to the what should donors do when you can't meet the indicators.
Go
But
ahead.
I'll take that one after. That was a question as well. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, maybe I could speak to the mitigation and adaptation and,
Sure.
and response. I think I think it's a chicken and egg situation where, you know, what is mitigation, what is response? Because it's usually cyclic events. How we've, in my experience, done it is some of the mitigation activities or interventions that we put in place at times end up also being response and I would say they're actually adaptation interventions. So it's really cyclic. You can't really say this is separate because, for example, when we start thinking about flood control, you'd then be doing that in terms of mitigating the effects of the flood into terms of sanitation facilities like what we had in Haiti. But later when it happens, then you have adaptation measures and activities or intervention that then pop up that we are ready for. And that's why I was saying I think it's important for especially financing to be allocated such that these funds are available for all these phases. But eventually all the phases are addressing the same thing. They're addressing making sure that lives are not lost, property is protected, and all this, and livelihoods are protected. So for me, they all are cyclic, but they're activities for each phase. But at the end of the day, they all are addressing almost the same thing. We're trying to guard against the same or build the same climate resilience for some of these communities.
Okay. We're going to give the last 2 words to Sasha and to Barbara, respectively, and then we'll begin closing out. So, Sasha.
2 words. No, in terms of
You've got a little bit more time than 2 words.
2 people.
Two people. Good. I couldn't have done it in 2 words. I just couldn't. But in terms of when there are indicators and standards and policies and you can't meet them due to a lack of resources and how donors should respond, I would say they should respond generously, but in a targeted way. And I think that this is why we collect data. And I have an example. So in recent flooding in December of 2024, one of our donors reached out to us. They said, we'd like to help. Can you tell us how many of your households have been affected? And we were able, because we collect that data, to say, of the 4,000, it was 2,883. And they were able to send funding specifically to support those households. So that's where I find that data incredibly useful. And in terms of the generosity, I feel like we're not living in a moment of generosity, but I am sitting in a university. And I just want to say, I think it is up to the education system to remind people that we do not need to capitulate to a future of greed. We can have a future of generosity. So teach your students that.
Barbara.
Oh, I can't follow that, right? Well, I was going to say a slightly linked thing in terms of what's the message. So there was a question about mitigation and adaptation, and in a very technical sense, if mitigation is the reduction of greenhouse gases, which obviously have an effect on the climate, and adaptation is our ability to cope with climate change. The research that we've done on the mitigation side drags us repeatedly to the space where we say if we manage our assets and our services really well, that's how we mitigate greenhouse gas emissions. And it turns out that that's the same for adaptation. It kind of doesn't matter what infrastructure you build. What matters is, are you managing it given the reality that you live in? And that's got a data dimension, it's got a coordination dimension, it's got a skills dimension, it's got a philosophical dimension. So I would almost say we sometimes get into this, could we do mitigation or should we do adaptation? I would say we should be doing actively managed, intentional service provision, and we win both sides of the story, and that includes paying for it. It's not cheap. But I would also argue not doing it is really expensive. So, you know, we've got to get better at framing this as a win-win, which has a sort of high net cost and benefit. But what are we going to do if we don't do it? Would be my take.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I think, you know, that was a really nice sort of summarizing of some of the themes and issues that we've touched on over the course of this plenary. So I think if you could join with me in thanking our panelists here and Leonie as well. Also thanks very much to Barbara for her presentation. It was fabulous and wonderful, as usual. And I'm going to be handing back to Kaida to take us to the next level.
Thank you so much again for the panel and for the great discussion here. If I could ask the plenary committee folks to come to the front of the stage as the speakers exit the stage, it would be great to have Clarissa and Jan Willem and anybody who is on our plenary committee take to the front of the stage, and I'll get to them in just a moment. That sort of concludes, it doesn't sort of conclude, it does conclude our series of plenaries for this year's Water and Health Conference. And so we hope that you've learned and that you've been challenged by everything that you've heard, and that you will continue the dialogue and discussion around these issues, because they weren't just presented here for fun. They're actually presented to challenge us and to get us thinking, and to hear from experts and hear from different perspectives and experiences about these topics. And they're very important, so I continue to encourage you to engage with these folks and the topics, and go to YouTube and re-watch some of the sessions and make sure you're gleaning the information that was discussed this week. And so, one, I would like us to thank the plenary committee for a wonderful series of plenary discussions. But additionally, I'm going to ask them to take the mic, and Joe Brown as well, if I can get you to join us on stage, because what I'd like them to do is just to give you maybe a one-sentence takeaway from each of their particular plenary sessions. So on day one, it was, oh, bleep, what next, right? And so we should be asking each one of them that. So you talked about climate, we talked about all these important issues, and Joe, you had an interview with Raj Kumar. What's the takeaway? What do we do next? And think about what you're advising all the young people and the next generation of leaders that are coming up in this sector to do with the discussions that we've had this week.
Thanks for putting us on the spot.
Yeah, you're welcome.
No, it's a lot
My
to
pleasure.
try and grapple with. I mean, we talk a lot about resilience of infrastructure. I think what I've heard from this community this week has really been a message of resilience and the need to create resilience in our community. And so, you know, that's really where I'm finding some pragmatic optimism. And I thought this conference would be a huge bummer in some ways. But it hasn't been. It's been so positive, and it's because of all of us. And I think it's because we have been tapping into that resilience, and I'm very grateful for that. Thank you.
Day two. Or Clarissa.
All right.
That was so long ago.
So day two plenary, role of the state, and that followed on, you know, day one, where we said, oh shit, what are we gonna do now? We're all gonna run out of money. And I think the clear message is that, of course, has always been, it's like without engagement of the state, without public funding, there is no possibility to build sustainable, resilient services. We heard that reiterated again, and that this moment that we're in also gives an opportunity to government to re-examine where their role is, excuse me, and how to engage in providing those services, reaching the poorest, and having them sustainable and resilient. So I was happy with that message.
Okay, well, when we were designing day three, we were thinking a lot about those health communities and public health emergencies that are really, I guess, dependent on some of the actions that we might take hopefully long in advance. It was a challenge to think about which diseases and which actors to sort of bring in, but cholera and this emerging vector-borne disease was one of them. And I think, you know, the message was we need to do better, more meaningful integration, and I think we dove into that with some reasonable detail. So thank you all.
Oh, okay. Day four. What happened on day four? I don't remember. When was that? Yeah, no. And day four. I mean, climate is like a little sort of fulcrum that pulls all those messages together, right? The state matters. The state is central to this business. Doing it early, doing it well is really central to that business. I think the other thing that maybe a sort of reflection on the whole event as well is that, I mean, I agree with you. I look around this room, I went to side events. You guys are rocking the world. The amount of amazing science and the amount of amazing ideas and creativity. And that's the only thing we have, right? That's the way we survive, we get out of this hole. You know, yeah.
You're rocking the world, but you look all a little sad right now. So let's do that. Sorry. Back. I didn't mean to. Joe was doing it all.
Okay. And Clarissa, do you want to take us home?
Is this on? Yeah. I just want to say one last thing, which is that this isn't all of the committee. I want to acknowledge the fact that there were several other members of the committee, some of whom weren't able to come. In the end, we had Yanko from WaterAid Zambia, Mary Ashinyo, who might still be here, Ollie Cummings, who also contributed, and some others that I've no doubt forgotten. So I'd just like to say how wonderful this committee was. All of them discovered it was way more work than they thought it was when they signed up for it. So thank you. And then the last thing I'd like to say is I think that one of the most interesting things that Raj Kumar said was the solution right now is not to give up, but to be more ambitious. And I agree that I look at the people here and I think there's the capacity there to be even more ambitious. So that's my takeaway.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. All good. And so now I'll turn it over to Nikki Banke.
Hi, everyone. I promised Kata, and I promise you that I will take less than 60 seconds. I know lunch is on the line. But on behalf of the organizers and former USAID staff, it's myself, Lisa Scheckman, Zach Burt, and Katie McElhinney. We organized the Beyond the Postmortem USAID series to kind of capture the legacy and the institutional memory of USAID WASH programs. And we wanted to thank everyone who came to those sessions. They were really incredible discussions, and I think in a difficult year, I hope it was a little bit of catharsis as well for everyone. I know it was for us. But regardless of whether you came to the sessions, I know there were a lot of competing sessions. There's so much that's interesting at the Water and Health Conference. Several people told me that they wanted to come but couldn't. So you have a chance to contribute to this kind of collection of information and experiences that we're taking. We are going to write a paper or essay that kind of captures the experiences of people's work with USAID WASH programming, the good, the bad, the ugly, and we want to kind of lay the groundwork for if there is a major influx of US government funding for WASH again, that we're not starting from scratch, that we're taking everyone's experiences and kind of creating a way forward. So if you would like to contribute to that, regardless of whether you came to the sessions, regardless of whether you've worked directly with USAID, please scan this QR code and fill out our survey. We would love to hear from you and hear about your experiences to make sure they're captured, because this is a great group of WASH minds and we didn't want to pass up the opportunity. So thank you so much.
And like I mentioned, we get new faces every day. And so I want to remind everybody that the Spotlight Speaker Series is still going on. And so please come back to the Grumman Auditorium after lunch for this really special Spotlight Speaker Series called After the Storm, Ensuring Safe Drinking Water Post-Hurricane Helene. So make sure you come back and hear some really great speakers after lunch. We are not having a technology and innovation showcase special today because, as you saw, we presented the awards. And so just to remind you, though, that there is another lunch special going on for young professionals in the Magnolia Room, Magnolia Lounge, and again in Willow Lounge, Soft Power, Safe Water. So make sure that you are still giving it your all and you stick around to the very end. If you're interested in a field trip, there's still space available, so please see the registration desk. And they're going to Owassa Jones Ferry Water Treatment Plant, the Owassa Mason Farm Wastewater Treatment Plant, and the Falls Dam Tour. So please purchase a ticket and get on a field trip for tomorrow. And again, many of you are leaving us today and tomorrow. So there is a luggage storage room in Wintergreen where you can keep your luggage after you've checked out of your hotels and store it there before you catch your flights out of RDU or wherever. The other thing that's going on tomorrow is Halloween, so we wish you a happy Halloween. There's parties on Franklin Street, so if you're out of Chapel Hill by then, it's probably a good idea, but you're welcome. You're welcome to the party, and we wish you safe travels. Again, thank you to our sponsors. I will say this every day, every year, that we cannot do this conference without our sponsors. And so again, thank you. Our deepest gratitude goes out to each and every one of our sponsors for making this possible and for your support, not just financial, but also your spiritual support to lift a conference like this. And so thank you again to all of our sponsors. Come back next year. The conference date is on the back of your program. It's October 26th to the 30th. And so we hope to see you back next year. And finally, I would like everybody to turn around and look at the sound booth. You might not have noticed it before, but that is Bart, who has run the plenary sessions all week long. And you also do not see Island Innovation. They're the ones who are hosting our online conference, the virtual program. And so thank you to Christian, and thank you to Jerome, who have lifted over 1,400 registrants on the online program. Over 105 countries are represented. So thank you to our online participants for joining. And now I would like to call Joe back to the stage, and we will send our final thoughts and wishes, anything?
Sure. Okay, thanks. We're aware we're between you and lunch, so thank you again so much. I've said thank you so many times this week to everybody who's taken the time to be here, especially with the obstacles. I'm not sure I would come to the United States right now if I were somewhere else. I'm joking, but thank you for being here. It's not been an easy year. We've been reduced numbers, but hopefully you haven't experienced a reduction in quality of programming. Not only the plenaries, the scientific sessions, the poster sessions, the side events have all been really, really excellent, and that's all thanks to you. So I hope you are able to take some of what you've learned here back home with you and focus on how we can deliver for the people who most need WASH services around the world. So thank you very much.
Yep. So on behalf of the Water Institute and the Plenary Committee and the conference organizing and the ESE and the Gillings School of Global Public Health, we would like to not close the conference because there's still a lot of programming. So make sure you stick around all afternoon and join us all the way to the end for the posters and the happy hour. But we would like to close the plenary series and wish you very safe close to 2025. Thank you and your families and your colleagues for letting you take a week away and joining us here in Chapel Hill. Have a very safe trip back home, wherever that may be, and we wish you all the best for a strong and a healthy and a happy finish to 2005, and see you again next year. And Bart's going to take us out of here with our outro music, and we wish you a safe trip home.
Thanks, that was great, Kate.
Yeah.
Thanks for all.
Yeah.